Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month we are looking at Japanese history, making this week's book Pax Tokugawana, The Cultural Flowering of Japan, 1603 to 1853 by Haga Toru. The accompanying cocktail is a sake berry, which is going to be 2 ounces of Haku Vodka, 6 ounces of sparkling sake, and strawberries mint to garnish. I'm kind of guessing at the cocktail. It comes from our favorite ramen restaurant here in town. It's a place called Haru. If you're ever in Reno and you get the chance, stop by. They are amazing. This is my favorite cocktail of theirs. I got the ingredients from the menu. No idea of the mix. I'm basically just basing the mix off of what I know of cocktails, which is pretty considerable at this point. So anyways, let's do this. In my review of last week's book, The Battle of Sekigahara by Chris Glenn, I included Glenn's brief description of the fall of the Tokugawa Shogunate, the 260 years of peace that Sekigahara ushered in, the kind of isolationism and how this culture flowered in Japan during that time. I'm cutting the heck out of these strawberries because I don't think they actually muddle them. I think they just smash them with ice while they stir it up. I have way too many strawberries on my plate for this. I think I'm just going to go with 1 strawberry. So this book goes into the details of that flowering because really, once peace has been obtained, what does a country do? A lot of cultures, I would actually even hazard to say most cultures, go into this expansionist streak. You know, they basically, they got to find some way to keep the people from rebelling and going all out and destroying the country internally. So they instead go outside and start expanding. And there are literally thousands of cultures, probably not thousands, hundreds of cultures across history that have done exactly that. You know, you got the Mongols, the British, the Spanish, the Americans, the Portuguese, the Persians, the Egyptians, Carthaginians, Sahelian empires. All continents, all cultures have had expansionists that go out and wreak havoc across the globe rather than just sit at home. Japan contracted inwards, heavily inwards. And just prior to Sekigahara, they had tried to expand out. They did, in fact, invade the Korean Peninsula, where they lost badly. And it might have been that loss and the subsequent battle with 30,000 dead that led to the Tokugawa Shogunate saying, nope, we're going to stay inside our country. Let me shake this up. You pour all of that in there. The ice, the strawberries, everything. And then you top it with sparkling sake. Might have been, I probably should have only done 1.5 ounces of the vodka, but we'll call this good for now. Sparkling, again, means there's some level of carbonation in it, so you don't just shake that in there too, because it will explode. Voice of reason and learning here. Now, the country's at peace, right? 1600, October 21st, 1600, Sekigahara happens, 30,000 dies. In the brutal civil war, country is fucking tired. And while it healed, it became uniquely artistic. It had artistic elements before, and the whole book is basically a series of essays the author had written about various aspects of Japanese culture during the Tokugawa Shogunate, exploring art, theater, humor, scientific exploration, and literature. But the art styles he discusses started well before the Tokugawa ascended. They were merely elevated during this period. Let's see if I can, wait. My mint garnish. I actually have mint, so I'm putting my mint garnish in. Let's see if this is any good. Too much vodka. Should have gone with 1.5 ounces. That's okay. So in this period, he dubbed the term Pax Tokugawana. The author coined this term, quote, in reference to the total peace that Japan built, maintained, and enjoyed both at home and vis-a-vis other countries under the Tokugawa Shogunate. Because they didn't go expansionist, right? They stayed internal. He deliberately modeled the idea after the Pax Romana, the period of time when culture and sciences flowered in ancient Rome, and they were no longer actively expanding. The first piece he describes is scenes in and around Kyoto, which is a very specific painting style of the day. The earliest example he mentions being from 1521, so a full 100 years before the Tokugawa Shogunate really kicked off. And this style of painting is exactly that. It's an artist captures a moment in time from in and around Kyoto. And it continues with examples from 1565, 1616, just little snapshots of life. And he includes images in the book of what these are and explains what we're seeing for those of us who were not born and raised Japanese and have no idea what exactly they're looking at. You know, I might look at it and say, okay, that's just a street scene. And he's like, no, here you have this vendor and here you have this vendor. You have a street performance and you have this going on. And he's explaining what it is you're looking at. And it's still drinkable, but should have only done 1.5 ounces of the vodka. That's okay. Live and learn. He takes us through how, while the country was 99% isolationist, the Dutch managed to retain a toehold, sending yearly tributes to the shogun. And in fact, one of the street scenes of Kyoto that he walks us through includes the Dutch minister visiting and his walk through Kyoto on his way to see the shogun. It was through these tributes that Japanese medicine actually advanced, thanks largely to the extreme fascination Dutch medicine had for one Sugita Genpaku, who pushed hard for the ability to study and translate Dutch works in order to advance science in Japan. In discussing the importance of literature, I found this absolutely amazing quote. Hang on. Oh. You know what would actually kick this up? I should have added some simple syrup. It wasn't on the menu, which is why I didn't do it. But I bet you if I put an ounce of simple syrup in there, did an ounce of vodka, an ounce of simple syrup, and the rest of the sparkling sake, I'll bet you that would make it just like the perfection of sweetness. I might try that next time. When he's discussing the importance of literature, and this was, I found this absolutely amazing quote. I love this quote because it is so cross-cultural in significance. Quote, students around the age of 20 invariably want to read Max Weber or Karl Marx, or more recently, Michel Foucault or Jacques Derrida. And when they have finished, they imagine that they now understand society and the life of the mind. That is an empty delusion. Reading crude translations of dry-as-dust treatises on sociological methodology or philosophy only dulls the brain and the senses. End quote. I adore this. I absolutely adore this. Well, Haga goes on to recommend Japanese works because, of course, this entire book is a love letter to an era of Japanese history that Japanese leftists consider the Dark Ages of Japan. He actually references that several times. It's considered the Dark Ages of Japan. And his whole point and his whole career was built around bringing to light exactly what was accomplished during this era of peace. The above statement is true of all 20-year-olds high on the smell of their own farts and sure that they have life figured out. I mean, read a book, any book, that is not required reading for your college class. Especially read classics and literature, because they will teach you how to think rather than what to think. And you will, in turn, learn more about who you are. I'm going to stand on a small soapbox here because that is not something I had ever considered about literature before. I mean, I've been a lifetime reader. My entire life I've read books. And I have read certain works of literature, not all of them, not extensively, but I have read some of the classics of literature, right? But two Instagrammers and YouTubers that I follow who have amazing insights and recommendations on classical literature for those of us who are not Japanese and probably couldn't find English translations of the works that he references in the book are Pens and Poison. I'm going to throw them up here. Pens and Poison and Chris Pfizer _ and I'll link to their YouTube channels as well. Both of them have made me realize that my own classics reading is comparatively sparse. When you consider everything that they're reading and the insights they're pulling out of it, I'm like, oof. I mean, I get that I'm mostly a nonfiction channel, but literature and fiction are important because they teach you empathy. They teach you how to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And they let you put you in a position that you may actually encounter in some form or another in modern day. And you'll have an idea of how people have reacted in the past. And it might be better than what your own reaction would be. Okay. Get off my soapbox now. Back to this book. Speaking of farts and high on the smell of them, he includes a large and delightfully witty section on a sketch called Fart Wars by Ogawa Usen, which is technically outside the Pax Tokugawana, but pulls back to a two-part essay by Hiraga Genai. I'm probably mispronouncing names, so I apologize. But he wrote a two-part essay on farting and on farting part 2. Absolutely love humor. While he doesn't mention it in this book, I cannot help but feel that Haga would enjoy Benjamin Franklin's contribution to the genre of farting, Fart Proudly. And yes, one of our founding fathers did in fact write a book called Fart Proudly. And yeah, you gotta, I love the humor. But, I also about died laughing the other day watching Tom Segura's Bad Thoughts on Netflix, episode 1. I had heavy on the fart humor. Almost every chapter includes artwork from the period, and I'm talking stunningly beautiful pieces and detailed images of nature, of home life, the street scenes in Kyoto, scenes of love, scenes of reposing at home with the family, of farting, of course. And they're just stunningly rendered. It's just breathtaking how detailed they are, and we don't see it here in the West. I mean, we're inundated with the great masters of European art. You know, the Monet, Manet, Van Gogh, the Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, Leonardo. We get all of those artists, you know, the ones who are greats in Europe. Which, okay, that's what our descent is, so that makes sense. But there's also the entire other half of the planet, and we don't get to see their artwork here as often, which is a shame because they've certainly heard of our greats. Why haven't we heard of theirs? And that's, again, more a failing of our educational system. Certainly not a failing of theirs, because they've at least heard of our famous people. This book drove home for me how very little I actually know about Japan. I mean, I think I always thought of Japan as cultured, but that was probably my own ignorance on the matter. I mean, not that they're not cultured, but it's just this blanket assumption I made. I never stopped to think, how did they get to be that cultured? Was this something that like they hatched in ancient history already cultured and just sprang up as this, you know, Bushido, civilized, chivalric samurai culture of extreme honor? Or did it take 200 years of enforced peace to make it so? It's just not something that I ever thought of. And again, that's 100% a failing on my end. It has nothing to do with Japan. It's a commentary on me, not them. Which is not to say, I mean, like I said, this book definitively proves that the culture existed and it was there. But back in the day, and this is in the book too, in Japan, China was considered high culture for much of this period. And even before that, even, it was a desire to invade China and that initial expansionism that led to the disastrous run of the Korean Peninsula in the 16th century. And it wasn't until Tokugawa took over that Japan had the chance to define what her own culture is to Japan and found her own voice. And it is cultured, I mean, very much so. While intellectual elitists in Japan may have considered the Tokugawa Shogunate a dark age, probably because of the isolationism, Haga makes a very strong case for this being an age of enlightenment in Japan, I mean, much as it was in Europe, right? This 1600 to 1700 into the 19th century was the age of enlightenment in Europe, and it was in Japan. And that's the argument he makes. It wasn't the Dark Ages for Japan. Contrary to that, it was the age of enlightenment in Japan. And look at all we discovered about ourselves. Because there were great strides in art, music, theater, science, medicine in Japan. And yes, some of that was through Dutch contacts. But without the long-standing peace provided by the Tokugawa Shogunate, the great thinkers of the day would not have had time to devote to such passions, and Japan may have truly lived in a dark age during that 250-year period. And, in fact, would have missed out on so much of what makes her culture today so admired in other parts of the globe. And that is it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.